I mean, they could have built another Manhattan Bridge, couldn't they? And he didn't. He really aspired to do something gorgeous. So, it makes you feel that maybe you too could add something that would last and be beautiful.
Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. My name is Mary Jane Shimsky. I am Majority Leader of the Westchester County Board of Legislators. And a number of elected officials from around New York State have decided to come together today to shine some light on the need for greatly increased infrastructure funding in this country, and to shine a light on HR 3339, a congressional bill which would create this country's, I believe, 5th national infrastructure bank. The need is just too vast to rely on appropriations alone. Before we go into our New York specific arguments, though, I understand that Congressman Danny Davis is somewhere nearby, and Congressman Davis is from Illinois, and he is the prime sponsor of HR 3339. Congressman Davis, are you with us yet?
This is Caleb Gilchrist. We're having technical problems with his computer right now, but he will come to my desk and say a few words.
Excellent, excellent.
Let me go get him. Thank you.
Okay. So while we're waiting for the congressman, just want to point out that we've heard about $500 billion numbers, $1.1 billion numbers. The American Society of Civil Engineers estimates that the need for infrastructure repairs and upgrades in this country is $5 trillion, not 1.1 trillion, $5 trillion. And that number is probably on the low side. So we certainly have a lot of need. And as I said, we'll let the congressman address the national issue, and then we'll go into our specific state issues.
Okay, now the congressman can't show on video because we don't have a video on this computer, but he can sit down and speak.
Okay, that's great. However we can connect with him is wonderful.
Okay, how are you doing?
Congressman Davis, it's great to hear your voice.
I am excellent. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Well, I am pleased to do so, and just having a little bit of technical difficulty here. So that's why you're not able to see me, but I am here and I'm delighted to be here. And I am delighted to be a part of this conference and this discussion.
Well, thank you very much. For those of you who don't know, Congressman Davis is the principal sponsor of HR 3339 to create the National Infrastructure Bank. Congressman Davis, the floor is yours. You can talk about how you came to be a champion for this issue. You could talk about the bill. You could talk about whatever you'd like.
Well, thank you very much. And as I indicated a moment ago, I am excited and delighted and certainly pleased to be a part of this effort. HR 3339, the National Infrastructure Bank Act of 2021, would create millions of permanent, high-paying jobs. It is modeled on previous public banks, which helped build much of our nation's infrastructure. Under Presidents George Washington, James Madison, John Quincy Adams, Abraham Lincoln, and Franklin Roosevelt, those banks helped finance the roads, bridges, canals, schools, hospitals, power systems, and railroads that made our nation the envy of the world. In fact, the last public bank, along with other sound policy initiatives, helped bring us out of the Great Depression and win World War II. The NIB would operate much like previous public banks. It will be capitalized with existing privately held treasury bonds exchanged for preferred stock in the bank. Budget outlays covering a portion of investor stock divided will be fully reimbursed from the bank's earning stream. As such, the bank will be budget neutral, require no new taxes, and create no new federal debt. It will have the authority to lend up to $5 trillion for urgently needed projects across the nation at very low interest rates. It would be complementary to President Biden and Vice President Harris's proposal and the Democratic House Majority legislative package to build back better our nation's infrastructure. So I want to thank my colleagues, Representative Bobby Reich, Representative Jesus Garcia, and Representative Mondaire Jones for sponsorship of H.R. 3339, the National Infrastructure Bank Act of 2021. Additionally, the state and local municipalities, current and former elected officials who are in support of this bill. So I thank you for your efforts on behalf of the National Infrastructure Bank Act. And as I've said many times, we need a $5 trillion investment in our infrastructure. Thinking small has resulted in the infrastructure crisis which are gripping our nation. And I'm very grateful for all of your actions. So we just have to keep up the fight. Sometimes you break off giant needs in ways that are not as giant as the need, but as long as you keep on coming, eventually you will get there. So let's never stop. Let's keep fighting, and ultimately we will indeed win. I thank you very much, and I am indeed pleased to be a part of this effort.
Thank you so much, Congressman. It was great to hear from you. Okay, with that, thank you so much, Congressman. You could stay on as long as you like, or if you have other things you have to attend to, that's fine as well. We're just so glad you were able to stop by.
Thank you, and carry on.
Oh, will do, sir. Now that we have an idea of what we're talking about here with the infrastructure crisis in this country and what we need to meet it, which is a $5 trillion national infrastructure bank, in addition to the appropriations that President Biden is trying to get through Congress. There's a New York State story as well to this. 9.9% of New York State's bridges are structurally deficient. The further upstate you go, the worse it gets. A larger number of bridges are what's called functionally obsolete, which means they're not designed to handle the traffic they're handling at this point. Approximately 11% of all of our mass transit rolling stock is past its useful life. We have billions of dollars of need for things like water quality, school repairs and upgrades, and housing that is affordable for our workforce. The sleeping giant of problems is our sewer systems. And here in Westchester County, we already have some really, really troubling signs. And that's probably true of every place in the state that has sewer systems. Hurricane Ida taught us so much about how far behind we are with storm resiliency and stormwater management. I could go on with many more issues, but we only have so many hours in the day. So we are all here because we recognize the need is vast and the ability for governments to appropriate money is limited. So we need, as a supplement, this bank. I am grateful to my Congressman Mondaire Jones for co-sponsoring the bill with Congressman Davis. And support is growing for this bill across the state. We have members of a number of local city councils and county legislatures around the state on the call today. Last month, the New York State Association of Counties passed a resolution in support of the National Infrastructure Bank at its fall legislative conference. So we all recognize, we the boots on the ground who have to deal with what happens when the roads fall apart, the bridges fall apart, the sewers fall apart. We know this is needed, and we are starting to unite among ourselves and make our voices heard. Why don't we go to former New York State Assemblyman Felix Ortiz, used to be Assistant Speaker of the New York State Assembly. Assemblyman Ortiz.
Thank you very much, Mary Jane, and thank you to all my colleagues on this important cross-state press conference. It's very important that we continue to support HR 33339 in Congress, and Congressman Davis, who has been a real champion to ensure that more members of Congress continue to break rank from the traditional mechanism of politics that continue to be played out in Washington. And I also would like to thank Mary Jane, you Congressman, for stepping to the plate to support these measures as well. At least we begin to see Congress people who getting the signal of what this, why are we all together throughout New York State and why we are all together throughout the country. Let me just tell you why I support this national infrastructure banking in a couple of sentences, if I can. The need of this is everywhere throughout the country. Broadband access in New York City is still unbelievable low. Over 38% of all New Yorkers households earning $25,000 or less have no high-speed home internet connection. 24% of the household in New York City metro area serving 750,000 students don't have high-speed internet. You mentioned Hurricane Ada, the last one that we had a few weeks ago in September 1st. Well, guess what? Our sewer infrastructure cannot collect the amount of water that is already coming through New York City due to the fact of if you drive through New York City, you will find out all the Horizon building that has been built in the last 4 or 5 years. And the infrastructure that we have in the sewer system is not capable enough to hold all this water that go through it. According to a report in the Sunday's Washington Post, which highlight New York State specific, the current bill in Congress will fund only 5% what is required to upgrade the nation energy transmission system. So my brothers and sisters on this call, we do have a lot of work to do, a lot of work to continue to step to the plate to convince our delegation of Congress and the 2 U.S. senators in New York State to do what is right, not for a soundbite political statement, but for our future generation. Lastly, one of the reasons I support this bill is because 2 years ago, when I was a member of the New York State Assembly, I was the first legislator to introduce a resolution calling on Congress to support the national infrastructure banking. And the resolution never went nowhere because our speaker, as you probably know by now, they don't believe that this resolution should be put on the agenda. But lastly, on the second point is that this bill would not engage any tax burn on the future generation to come. Thank you very much. May God bless you and the fight continue, and let's do it together.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Ortiz. I'll now call on Thomas Carey, who is president of the Westchester-Putnam Central Labor Body. He is part of the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Union, which was one of the early supporters of the NIB. And he has his own story as to why this is so important. So Tom, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Mary Jane. First I want to welcome all my colleagues on the call today. And I also want to welcome all of our elected officials who've been so helpful with you trying to get HR 3339 passed. I see many of you on here this morning, and I really have to thank our majority leader, Mary Jane Shimsky, for hosting this meeting. And the minute I mentioned this to Mary Jane, she took this like a running back on a football team and just ran right to the top with it. Mary Jane, I can't thank you enough. This is a phenomenal bill that we need to get across the finish line. I was talking to some people this morning. There's a little bit of confusion going on in Congress right now. And I think what they're going to realize when the time comes is that HR 3339 is the goal.
Oh dear. Okay.
Did I lose you?
You froze a little bit for about 5 seconds or so.
All right. So, I want to thank you. And I also want to thank our Peekskill board member, Patricia Riley. Patricia, along with Mary Jane, have been phenomenal. And Ruth Walter, I see you out there as well. I can't thank you guys enough because this resolution is absolutely necessary. At our national convention in San Diego last month, we passed a resolution to adopt HR 3339. And there was 3,600 members in attendance at that convention, and it was unanimously adopted. So I can't stress the importance of getting this bill passed, and now is the time. I can't think of a better time than right now. So I just want to thank everybody for your time, and Mary Jane, keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, Tom, and having labor in our corner on this. You are a very important stakeholder here, and we are definitely going to need labor support to get this across the finish line. Okay, our next speaker is Merton Simpson. He represents District 2 in the Albany County Legislature.
All right, well, in the interest of time, I'm going to speak very quickly, but I just want to say that I'm glad that a lot of my colleagues from the Albany County Legislature are on board. We're going to have to do this many more times. So I think what we're going to wind up doing is having members of the Albany County Legislature take turns along with members of the Albany City Common Council so that we all can be represented, because this is clearly a need that's long overdue. And sadly, the need has actually accelerated by political events that heretofore would never be anticipated, but we have to hit the ball where it lies, as they say in golf. And so we don't have a choice but to deal with what's on our lap. Albany is a historic city. When the city of Albany succeeded Poughkeepsie as the capital of New York State in 1797, it already had a storied history going back to 1614. Albany is the longest continuously charted city in the United States. And so obviously we have very significant infrastructure needs. As a matter of fact, the rains that happened maybe 2 weeks ago, Thursday, actually forced one of my neighbors out of their home for flooding. And we've recently had winds so strong, even in Albany, that they've taken roofs and sides of houses. We've had horrific rains, and the climate has really radically shifted. And so, I once had a gallery on Madison Avenue and on 6th Avenue and 28th Street. Within the last 2 weeks, the subway on 28th Street was completely submerged underwater. That has never happened before. These 500-year events are happening in rapid succession with greater intensity. We've had probably in the last 3 weeks, we've had, or 4 weeks, Henri, Ida, and then Nicholas. The Northeast is a very old section. Albany is one of the first early capitals of the country in terms of the political infrastructure. And our needs are great, but New York State also has, pipes that go back to over 100 years that, as Assemblymember Ortiz pointed out, is beyond the capacity of our present structure to handle. So what's happening in Washington really exemplifies the need for what we're trying to do now, because you can't really minimize the need and the resources that they need to be allocated to fit a certain problem. The pandemic of COVID, in conjunction with the political direction that the country is taking, has made it more urgent than ever before that we pass this needed legislation. And the importance of 3339 is that it will create an economic solution to the problems that have been exacerbated by COVID. If your job is to change beds in a hotel and you lose that job, where do you go? Albany is a city of less than 100,000 people. We have a large number of hotels. One of the hotels that I frequent, the Renaissance, normally has a capacity of 80%. They've been reduced to a capacity of around 11%. And so many people who depended on their livelihood no longer have employment. And because this scourge is systematic, there's no place for them to retreat to. We find out that we have deficits in terms of people going to stores, and there's a loss of toilet paper. People are gutting toilet paper. But what's even worse now is that our supply chain has been compromised. COVID has created an infrastructure in which we don't have sufficient truck drivers to move the freight from the ports. Then we also have the exacerbation of oil spills in California, which make it difficult for the fleet to deliver the stuff to the dock. So there's a supply chain that trickles down that causes unforeseen consequences on a very large level. 3339 is the necessary antidote for all of these problems. And you can't tinker around the margins, and you can't fool Mother Nature. You can't have your head in the oven and your feet in the freezer and say on average, you're normal. It doesn't work that way. So I urge us to continue this fight. I think that the benefits of 3339 are well lined out. And I think the average person doesn't have a grasp of how great the need is. We don't really.
And that is why we are here, right, Merton?
That is why we're here.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. And we thank you for bringing on so many of your colleagues from the Albany Legislature today. Is Assemblymember Burdick?
Here he is.
No,
I'm here, Mary Jane.
Assemblymember Burdick.
Hi, Assemblyman. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Mary Jane. And thank you for emceeing this. And I know that there are a lot of people who want to say a few words, and so I will be brief. And I want to first thank all of the advocates that are working to push this forward. It's obviously a heavy lift to try to get legislation through Congress, but there's nothing more vital than dealing with the crumbling infrastructure that we have in this country. And whether or not we have a bipartisan infrastructure bill, whether or not we have further legislation, the National Infrastructure Bank concept is something that's brilliant and makes perfect sense, because this is something that provides for a sustained and long-term solution to dealing with the infrastructure issues that face this country. And as a member of the Assembly, my role is to try to work side by side with the advocates and with my sisters and brothers in labor to try to get support in the New York State Assembly for a sign-on letter to go to the president and Congress saying, let's get this moving. Let's get this enacted. Let's get going on trying to restore our, as I mentioned, our crumbling infrastructure. This is so important to the lives and the safety and health of the entire country. You know, we've seen in the past where we've had bridges that literally crumble and fall down. And we just cannot continue in that fashion with dealing with the critical needs of this country. So again, I want to thank everyone for the work that you're doing. Mary Jane, thank you for the work you're doing within the Westchester County Legislature and working with other county legislatures across the state. So again, thank you all for all you are doing to move this forward. And I don't mean to be rude, but I have two other Zoom rallies and conferences that I'm also on. And again, thank you so much for what you're doing.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Okay, next, we've got a murderer's row here from Albany County. We'll now go to representative from District 7, Beroro, Efekoro. Assemblyman Efekoro, are you with us?
Yes, thank you very much, Mary Jane. I want to commend everyone that is here today, and also for Met for putting this together. I mean, helping to put this together. From what I initially said on my response, the press release, Albany, I live in Albany and I represent a district in Albany. I'm not sure if you guys can see me very well. Let me move around here. So I represent the 7th district in Albany, and I lived in New York City previously before moving to Albany. And the distance, or when you go by train, the distance you would spend basically around 2 hours on Amtrak, basically trying to get from New York City to Albany or from Albany to New York City. And in the 21st century that we currently live in, I believe we can cut that number significantly down with a speed rail, high speed rail, from about 2 hours to 45 minutes. And as you all may be aware, Albany was recently rated as one of the best cities to live in the United States. And in New York State, the best city to live in the state of New York. And the jobs also are in New York City. So I see no reason why people are not able to live in Albany while they work in New York City. So if we are able to cut the travel distance down from 2 hours or 2.5 hours for some to about 45 minutes or less than an hour, then that would be possible for people to actually live in Albany while they work in New York City. And I believe a national infrastructure bank would help to make this possible, to invest in our infrastructure, invest in our rail lines, our trains. We have these high-speed rails in China. And if we are competing with China for economic opportunities, we have to improve on our infrastructure, and we have to improve significantly, not just meet what China is doing, but surpass what China is doing. And that is why I'm very much in support of this national infrastructure bill. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you so much, Legislator Efekoro.
Thank you.
You bring up something very important, which is it's not just about fixing what's broken. We have to get ready for the new technological advances of the rest of this century, and high-speed rail is certainly a big part of that. So we thank you for shining light on that issue for us.
Thank you very much.
Is Sam Fein from District 6 of the Board of Legislators on at this point? There he is.
I'm here. My name is Sam Fein. I represent the 6th District. in the Albany County Legislature. I just want to thank my colleague Merton Simpson for organizing this, as well as everyone else, Mary Jane Shimsky and everyone else who organized this important press conference. And, for me, infrastructure, I think it's really one of the most important things. It's one of the things we often overlook, or we don't think about, we take for granted. But because of that, we've been underfunding our infrastructure needs for years nationally. And it's something that has now, really caught up with us. And now we're in a drastic situation where we have to take, extreme actions. And, I'm thankful that it looks like Congress, hopefully they get through the infrastructure package, but we know that's not nearly enough. And we're going to need the National Infrastructure Bank to really both make up all of the, all the underfunding, everything, the decrepit infrastructure that we haven't been funding, and build towards the future. So I think that, investment in infrastructure can create a competitive economy for the future, can create a green economy. We can be leaders on that. I know a few of my colleagues have spoken about the city of Albany, and like many old cities, we have a lot of crumbling infrastructure, roads, bridges. We have very old water infrastructure. We have lead pipes feeding many of the homes. Of course, that's a health issue for many children. We have old heating systems that we need to upgrade to clean energy. We have old housing. We have vacant buildings throughout the city, housing crumbling. And oftentimes these issues are more pronounced in lower income communities and in communities of color, like the district that I represent. And so, I think we have a real opportunity to both, I mentioned competitiveness and a green economy and building for the future, but also to address a lot of the inequities in infrastructure that exist. And so, things like housing, as I mentioned, are really important. Building more housing, building affordable housing and green housing, public transit. Beroro, I thank you for mentioning high-speed rail. That's very important, but also our, local public transit, whether it's subway system or a bus system, as we have here in Albany. I've been pushing to make our bus system fare free, and I'd like to see a lot more investment as well in increased bus routes, in rapid bus transit, and other ways to promote public transit and have more people take the bus, have more walkable communities, and in greener and more sustainable communities. So all of these issues are so much related. If we really want to create a better future for ourselves, have more sustainable cities, more sustainable communities, infrastructure is really the key. And so this is so necessary. I think it's really important that we're all here today pushing the National Infrastructure Bank.
Thank you so much, Legislator Fein. Is Joyce Love from the Albany Common Council on at this point?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me. My name is Joyce Love, and I'm a member of the Common Council, and I represent the 3rd Ward. I am a proud lifelong resident of Albany. I can remember at times in my youth when the Arbor Hill neighborhood of Albany was thriving. Not unlike the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, or the town of Rosewood, Florida, and so many other Black sections of America. When I was in elementary school in Arbor Hill, had Black doctors, lawyers, pharmacists, shoe stores, Black clothing, men's stores, bakeries, and many professional businesses. Today, due to redlining, gerrymandering, absentee landlords, and inadequate government support, Albany's inner city has been reduced to the answer in a jeopardy question in the city that amplifies urban blight. Several decades of neglect and exploitation can only be rectified by an infrastructure program that is equal to the deficiencies House Bill HR 3339 at the level of the resource allocation with the need. We will pass a resolution supporting HR 3339 on the Common Council, and I will do anything in my power to see that this is implemented for Americans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. We're now going to go back to Westchester County. We have a few more of our leaders, and to give a perspective from one of our cities, I'll now call on Councilwoman from Peekskill, Patricia Riley.
Thank you, Mary Jane, and thank you everyone for being here today. Yes, my name is Patricia Riley. I'm on the City Council in Peekskill, New York, which is another city in Westchester County. We have passed a resolution to support our council several months back for HR 339, and I was very proud to bring that forward and making the public aware of what's going on and how we need to support this important bill for our infrastructure. The time is now to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. We have global warming. We have seen what happens when our weather patterns change and shift, and our infrastructure isn't prepared for it. Our council is talking about implementing electric vehicles into our fleet of city vehicles. But we have to make sure we have infrastructure to support that. I'm sure many other municipalities are talking about going green, getting more electric cars and buses, but we have to make sure that we have an infrastructure in this country that can support all the new electric vehicles. And that's a good thing that we're doing, but we have to make sure that our infrastructure can support that. We also want to bring, with this HR 3339, this will bring good union paying jobs. I've been a labor leader with the Lakeland Federation of Teachers in Westchester County for many, many years. And when you have good union paying jobs in our country, building infrastructure, it's a win-win, because we need to get America working again. We need to rebuild our infrastructure. We need to rebuild our economy. And that is why I support passing HR 3339. So let's build back better, and we need to do it now. So thank you very much, Mary Jane. I'm keeping it short.
Thank you very much, Patricia. We'll be hearing from Patricia a little later. She's got statements from some of our leaders around the state who have not been able to attend, but wanted to lend their support. But we will give her a chance to catch her breath. And now we'll call on Westchester County Legislator Ruth Walter.
Thank you so much, Mary Jane. As majority leader on our board, Mary Jane has been a true leader on infrastructure. She is a model to many of us for really digging into the details of what it is we're investing in. And we're proud on the board of how many dollars we put into our infrastructure, but there's so much more to do. I'm really excited to be involved in this effort to get the National Infrastructure Bank bill passed. Just one aspect of it, lead in our drinking water is a crisis of health and education. These, effects on a developing brain of lead are irreversible. And, this is something that cities and towns, they need some overarching and, directed infrastructure spending in order to bring us out of this dark place where some of our water is not safe to drink. And so between all of the different high-speed rail and broadband, there's so much to invest in, and we know that investment pays off, and our economy will be stronger, our workforce will be stronger, our families will be stronger. And so the money is an investment, not tax dollars. It is in a separate bank, and I'm really excited to advocate for this. Our board, led by Mary Jane Shimsky, passed a resolution in support of this last year, and we were unanimous, and we will continue to work together in any way that we can in order to promote this. So thank you, Mary Jane. Thank you everyone on this call. Good paying labor jobs is really important, and we need to invest in this way. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ruth. I'd now like to go back to Councilwoman Riley, who will be reading us statements from elected officials from other parts of the state.
Okay, Mary Jane, thank you very much. This one is from David Donaldson, the chairman of Ulster County Legislature. And he states, We need HR 3339 to bring our nation's infrastructure into the 21st century. Creating a new national infrastructure bank will be an economic boost like no other in history. Too many of our roads, our bridges, our railroads, our bulkheads, and our airports have been neglected for too long. We also must meet the infrastructure needs to meet the demands of electric vehicles, clean energy production, as well as the flood control and stormwater management projects that climate change will bring. The next one that I have is from Councilman Ydanis Rodriguez from New York City, and he states, I am proud to stand in solidarity with the leaders gathered today in support of a national infrastructure bank as spelled out in Congressional Bill HR 3339. The ongoing infrastructure crisis demands that we think outside the box. This summer, we saw our subways give way to the heavy rainfall we experienced, causing horrendous flooding that engulfed New York City. In Queens, the failure to build new infrastructure resulted in people dying in their apartments, said Councilmember Ydanis Rodriguez, chairman of the Transportation Committee. Generational flooding overwhelmed significant parts of the New York City subway systems. The price to fix and update our nation's infrastructure will cost well over $5 trillion, and the National Infrastructure Bank is a start in the right direction. I am proud to be a co-sponsor of City Council Resolution 1432, alongside my colleague Robert E. Cornegi, calling upon Congress to pass legislation establishing a national bank for infrastructure and manufacturing. Best, Thomas Garita, Communications Director. That's applied that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for reading those for us, Councilwoman. There are two other people who I would like to recognize, one of whom is on this call, one of whom may be trying to get on the call, and we're keeping an eye out for him. But on the call, we have Efekoro, former senior economist from the IMF. She's a macroeconomist by trade, and she is one of a group of technical experts in various fields who have been behind this movement. This is an organization and a movement that is grounded in the best 21st century research and facts that we can muster. And Efekoro is the best, is one of the best examples of that. So thank you for being on. The second thing I do want to point out, and we are seeing if we can find him at the last minute, but just last week, we got our first congressman from New York State to co-sponsor HR 3339. And that is my Congressman, Mondaire Jones. Congressman Jones, as you know, is a freshman congressman, but he has begun taking leadership positions in the Democratic caucus. He has fast become a very well-known and well-respected member of that body and of the New York caucus. And having him as a co-sponsor at this point is a really great thing. And I hope that while he is the first New York congressperson to be a co-sponsor, I hope he is nowhere near the last. So thank you very much, Congressman Jones. At this point, that concludes, I believe, our official program.
We still have Michael O'Brien.
Oh, we do have Michael O'Brien. Michael O'Brien.
Yeah, thank you. On the Albany Common Council, I've been on the General Services Committee for my whole tenure. And obviously it's more mundane than the high-speed rail. It's just simply the city streets, the parks, the sidewalks, and not just sidewalks, but other walking amenities that we've never had enough money to adequately maintain. And every year, every budget year, it's kind of a competition between 15 wards. Obviously, this would be a big help. And this is an enlightening thing. I support President Biden's agenda of the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill and the $3.5 trillion Build Back Better Act. But I'm being constantly educated on the idea of an infrastructure bank. And I was surprised to learn from the remarks that Congressman Davis made that I knew it went back at least until Franklin Roosevelt. What I didn't know was this concept of infrastructure banks went back even much further back to the early days, some of the early administrations of our country. So it's not a radical idea, it's a common sense idea. And I applaud you for your efforts to get recognition for this and to push ultimately for its adoption nationally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us, Councilman. And at this point, do we have any other legislators who want to make comments?
Yes, this is Carolyn McLaughlin. I
Okay.
want to make a comment. I represent the District 1 in the Albany County Legislature and previously served as president of the Albany Common Council. So these are issues that we have been confronted with for decades. So to see a bill such as HR 3339, it gives us hope that some of the issues that we are confronted with here in Albany County can be addressed. When I think of this bill, I think of jobs, jobs, jobs. And if you have jobs for people in your community and they are performing jobs that are rebuilding their community, then you're going to have a sustainable community for our children and our families. You're talking about housing infrastructure. You're talking about an educational infrastructure. You're talking about waterway infrastructure. So if we can educate the community on what infrastructure means and what it means to you, I think that we will see people in droves out in the streets and contacting their members of the legislatures to get on board, because this is something that there's no city, there's no state that will not be positively impacted by the National Infrastructure Bank. So if we don't get this message out, people, they have to be educated in plain English as to what this means and what it means to you as an individual. I will do whatever I can. As I listen to everyone today and listen to Congressman Davis, I am all the more energized to do what needs to be done to make this a reality. Thank you so much, Merton. And I continue to look to you as one of my leaders on this issue here in Albany County. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Legislator McLaughlin. As you pointed out, this is a problem that was decades in the making, but it's definitely coming to a head now. And now is the time where we're going to need big action to get a handle on it. With that, unless someone has anything else to say right now, we will adjourn and onward and upward.